that one today.
Okay. All right, doesn't matter. Anyway, that's funny. Oh, well. I probably emailed it to who knows what.
Hard to get out in the woods and have access.
I had Chris asked me to text him the Zoom, and I went, not in 100 years can I figure out how to do that. You're going to get an email. So there you go. We have a quorum, so I can go ahead and call the meeting to order. So I call to order the meeting of, oh my gosh, September 13th, Finance Committee.
Somebody mute, please.
Not me. Okay. The Finance Committee of September 13th. And I'm going to read the script for remotely conducted open meetings. Okay. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserved the right to remove any members of the public from the meeting who doesn't use a full name or acts inappropriately. As a preliminary matter, this is Denise Cronow, Chair of the Finance Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. And I will start in the order in which I see you. Peter Schaefer.
Here.
George Harrington.
Here.
Joe Grouse.
Here.
Stephen Morey.
Here.
Jill Veith.
Here.
Joanna Roach.
Here.
Thank you. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Again, in the order in which I see you. Brian Turbot.
Present.
Livy Gibson.
Present.
Rick Sears.
Here.
Terry Norton. Thank you, Terry. Okay, good afternoon. This open meeting of the Finance Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting of the Finance Committee, we're convening by video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Okay, please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference for the 14th time. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided by members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda, and before we do so, allow me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda, and then I will ask if any of the members have any comments. Please hold until your name is called. Remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. If you wish to engage with other members of the FinCom, please do so through the chair. And then after the members have spoken, I will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. And the members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Okay, so may I get an approval of the agenda, please?
Move approval of the agenda.
And a second.
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 Thank you. And roll call. Peter. Thank you. Joe.
Aye.
George. Stephen.
Aye.
Joanna.
Aye.
Jill.
Aye.
Denise, aye. The agenda is approved. And unbelievably, I didn't pull the agenda up on my computer. So, Brian, please let me know what the next item is on the agenda.
Public comment.
Okay, thank you. And as there are no members of the public participating, here comes Chris, then I open it for public comment, close it for public comment. There we go. Okay, thank you. Hi, Chris.
Hi there, sorry I'm late.
That's okay. All right, next agenda item, please.
Approval of the minutes from July 27th, 2021.
Thank you. Are there any changes to those minutes? Seeing no hands raised, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Here we go. Peter? Joe?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Stephen?
Aye.
Joanna? Jill?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Denise, I unanimously approved. Thank you. And I think the next agenda item, Brian, is over to you. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank
Rick, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen, I would appreciate it, please. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Perfect. No, yeah, thanks. Oh, perfect, thank you. So we're going to take you through the presentation that is ultimately going to be given to the select board on the 22nd of September. I want to caution everybody, as I always do through this is extremely preliminary. We haven't even finalized the fiscal 22 tax rate yet. So this is a very preliminary projection of where we think things will end up in terms of revenue and some of the known potential expenditures that we already do know will most likely be in fiscal 23. So with that, the presentation, as we historically have always done, just kind of gives everybody a reminder of what Proposition 2.5 is and how it's calculated. I don't think I need to take everybody through this slide again. So if you go to the next slide, Rick. So, thank you. So this next slide also just a reminder, a refresher for everybody how we actually can increase the levy limit through the allowable 2.5% increase revenue for real and personal property taxes, new growth, overrides, which would be permanent increases to the levy limit, and temporary exclusions being debt exclusions and or capital exclusions. Next slide, please, Rick. So on this slide here, we have the preliminary levy limit, our projection of what the levy limit will be for fiscal 23. The first column is fiscal 22 projected. The fiscal 22 projected maximum allowable levy limit prior to debt exclusions is $88,818,969, which does also include the voter approved $5 million override for our island home. The maximum allowable levy limit, we're projecting for 22 is 97 million, which does include $8.8 million in debt exclusions. So to calculate the beginning projection for fiscal 23, we start with the $88,818,000. We're proposing increasing that by the maximum allowable 2.5%, which would generate $2,220,000 in additional revenue. We're level funding new growth as of right now at $700,000. We're still in the process of getting fiscal 22 certified, so I'm a little reluctant to get much farther away from that until we have a better idea of where fiscal 22 will end up. All told, that would give us fiscal 23 allowable levy limit of $91,739,439. Adding to that $8.8 million in debt exclusions that are currently on the books would give us a maximum levy that we could raise in real and personal property taxes of $100,563,000. Next slide, Rick. Here we have the fiscal 23 projected local estimated receipts. On the left first column is where we're projecting that we'll end up when we certify the recap sheet with the local estimated receipts for fiscal 22. And then fiscal 23 gives an idea of where we think we may be able to go based on the actuals from fiscal 21. As I always remind everybody, the first quarter of fiscal 22 will be a good indication of whether we're on target with where we think fiscal 23 can, where we think we can reasonably land in our estimates. So we're projecting right now that we can raise $14,472,300 in local estimated receipts. The majority of that made up between building permits, electrical wiring permits, rooms tax and meals tax, and also excise tax. Next slide, Rick. So this slide shows you what we project for total revenue available to spend on the town priorities between school and town. As I've already explained, we believe we can raise in the real and personal property taxes $100,563,000. We're estimating $400,000 for abatements and exemptions. $14,522,000 for local receipts, and then $3.88 million in state and local aid. We have not changed that number because the state government does not typically come up with their revenue projection until December. So we are level funding it at this point, although the administration has generally raised the unrestricted general government aid by the same amount of revenue growth that they've predicted. So we do think there may be a slight increase, but at this point, we're holding that level with what we was approved for fiscal 22. All told, we're projecting $118,566,000 in revenue. Next slide, Rick. This slide shows where we ended up in terms of total revenues for the fiscal year and shows the last, well, from 2017 through 2021, excuse me. So the last 5 years and what the growth rate has been. Next slide. So this slide is the first of, I think, two slides with the preliminary expenditures on it. The left-hand column is the approved budget as voted at town meeting. The fiscal 23 budget projections. Salaries for town and school do include small amounts, or school includes their entire rollover. Town includes an estimate for rollover for any contractual agreements that we know are in existence and would be rolled into the next fiscal year. Salaries, we're projecting $50,284,507,000 as a starting point. One thing to note, this does not include any expense increase requests or any new personnel projections. This is simply taking what was in there and moving forward. Operating expenses, we have initially put in here $7,774,000. I will note that that removes all one-time expenses from the $8,699,000 that was approved at town meeting. So that's the starting basis for moving forward with operating expenses for the town. We've increased the mosquito control by the 2.5% for the override that was voted in 2011. And the operating expenses for the school were held level minus the one-time expenses that we allotted them in the fiscal 22 budget. Medical for active and retired employees, we're projecting a 12% increase right now. It's very early in the year. We're only in September, so it's very early to be able to start doing any real actuarial projections on where the rate will fall, because the majority of your claims in the first 2 to 3 months at the start of the new fiscal year are typically run out claims from the prior year. So we don't really see any actual fiscal 22 claims until we start into October. So conservatively, we're at 12% right now. I do expect that this is in a downward trend based on the last couple of years of history that we have. General and other insurances is projected to increase to $3.4 million. The main driver is we worked very hard to limit our general insurance increase to about 18% last year. We have about 15% budgeted now based on the trend that we're seeing. I will note that we are going to be going out to bid. Again, this is the fourth year with the insurance program that we're in. So we are going to put this out to the market. We do know that there may be some markets that would be interested in potentially writing the insurance in our book of business. So we are going to undertake that process starting in January of next year. Debt service, principal, and interest has decreased slightly in total to $9,500,000. So all told, initially, we have $99,461,000 in expenses in the general fund. Next slide, please, Rick. This slide shows you the other articles, including any special fund transfers. We have projected an increase in the county assessment. We have left Health and Human Services at $650,000. There will be money on the special purpose stabilization line, but it's from the marijuana local option tax that we won't know until we get closer to town meeting or a little bit later in this year with what that receipts will be able to be divided. Reserve fund, other post-employment benefits fund, we have the same. Affordable Housing Trust, I apologize, this should have been in there for fiscal 22 as well, but we are putting the same $1,625,000 in raise and appropriate. We're projecting that into 23. Town and mid-school minimum capital requirement is 1% of local estimated receipts and real and personal property tax collected. It's $1,070,000. It's slightly lower than last year because we did raise, we a little bit more than the requirement to fund two projects. Then we have the transfers to the enterprise fund, $5,125,000 to our island home, and then $3,839,000 and $2,826,000 to the solid waste enterprise fund. Other statutory expenditures, projecting cherry sheet offsets to be the same at this point. We do expect that to slightly change from the $1,012,000. All told, $116,790,000, which as of today would leave us $1,776,000 to allocate for initiatives and other priorities that we choose to fund. Next slide, please, Rick. So this does the same thing as the revenue slide, shows you the expenditures on an actual basis from 2017 through 2021. Next slide. So still left to be determined. Free cash, we expect to be submitting right around the first week of October with the hope of it being certified by October 9th, the week of October 9th. Local estimated receipts for Q1, which will help determine fiscal 23's potential local estimated receipts. Certainly, I think we've had a very good first quarter for fiscal 22 with local option rooms and meals tax, but as I always caution everybody, we really like to see that first quarter before we make any real solid or more refined recommendations. We still do have some union negotiations that are ongoing, so those are still to be determined. Health insurance, as I mentioned to the committee, we really will start seeing the ability to predict more accurately in the coming months, and we do expect that this number will go down from the 12% we've included. Retirement assessment, we do expect it to continue at 8.5%, but we certainly we're in constant contact with them, with the Barnstable County Retirement Board, to ensure that that number stays the same per the funding schedule. Local aid is always kind of an unknown at this point, since Boston hasn't determined what their revenue projections are for next year, and we're very early in the process. We have year-round NRTIA on here, more so most likely really for any fast ferry connector shuttles or anything like that, or any potential schedule or route changes, not really related to funding. PFAS is a real unknown at this point as the town begins the process. As you remember, we allocated $750,000 at last year's town meeting, and I don't think anybody thinks that that's going to be the end of it for us. So that's still an unknown as we work through that with CDM Smith. And then the last two, the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund and the Wastewater Infrastructure Improvement Fund, really kind of go hand in hand. The town can petition to join the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, which would apply 2.75% to the rooms tax, and that money would be sent to Boston and then sent back to the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund to be distributed among all the Cape towns and the island communities if we chose to participate. However, we've also been trying to analyze whether it would be better to create a wastewater infrastructure improvement fund, which would operate in a very similar pattern and method to the Community Preservation Act. One of the thought processes that we're trying to look at is, would it be better to have all of the money stay on the island versus and then be allocated, and how long it would take for us to essentially recoup or be distributed an equal amount to what we've contributed over the years to the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund. And that's something that we kind of slowed down, I think, because of COVID, but it's something that we're working on as a way to address stormwater and potential sewer infrastructure and a funding source dedicated to those particular items. So with that, I know Levy has any additional observations on the to be determined slide that she would like to discuss.
Thanks, Brian. We've gone over this presentation several times, by the way, and it's scheduled to go to the select board next week. You all are invited to that meeting. And I'm trying to get an ad hoc budget work group meeting going, which consists of the chair and vice chair of the select board, school committee, and finance committee, myself, Brian, and the school superintendent. And I had it beautifully set up for a day next week, and I found out a short time ago that I have to reschedule it. So I'm trying to get it reschedule. But anyway, that group typically meets right around now to kind of go through what we're looking at and have maybe frank discussions about what our situation is and what can and cannot be what the best priority situation could be. I also just wanted to mention that on that last slide, the GDP determined slide, another thing to be determined in the fiscal 23 budget potentially is citizen warrant articles. We routinely do not budget for those. However, there's obviously a misconception in the community about that. And even though it's quite clear throughout the budget process in every presentation we do that we are not budgeting for citizen warrant articles. So those, we obviously don't know what they would be yet, but FYI. And sidebar on that, I am in the process of finalizing the citizen warrant article guide, how to submit a citizen warrant article, and putting a little bit of extra wording in there about citizen article funding, that it's typically not budgeted for by the town through the process. And I think I will send you guys that narrative just so you can see what or the link or something like that, so you can see what it says to refresh in case you all get asked by citizens, oh, I'm thinking of submitting an article. Wouldn't it be great if I did such and such? And a lot of times people think, oh, we'll just go to town meeting with a citizen article for whatever. But that's really not the way to get it funded. I'm hearing a kind of an echo of my own voice, so I'm going to stop there. But that was about all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Libby. Thank you, Brian. Questions? Joe?
Brian, the 700,000 in the revenue slides, the 700,000 that's budgeted as new growth. I don't really know what the scale is. It looks a little conservative to me. What was new growth? What was the new growth factor for fiscal 21, and what do you think it's really running for in fiscal 22?
It was about just right around $1 million in 21. It most likely is going to be higher than the 700,000 in 22, but they're really just beginning the deep dive into the permits and what's been completed and what can be counted or what can't be counted. So we've conservatively have budgeted there. If based on, as we move through this process, if it looks like we are going to be submitting substantially more to the state for certification for fiscal 22 tax recap process, then we certainly would discuss with the assessor what their thoughts were on potentially increasing it from the 700,000 for fiscal 23. But a lot of it really is dependent on how fast projects get completed and what percentage we can actually capture of a project. So it's kind of it has been conservative, and it has been a little bit higher particularly in probably the last couple of years. But that's typically where the assessor starts us out at. And then if they think we can, based on their view, the fiscal year we're setting the tax rate recap for, we certainly would increase it. And I think we have in prior years when we've had the opportunity, if we can, and we feel comfortable with it.
Thank you. Can I one other question?
Go ahead.
I seem to remember in a similar meeting either last year or the year before, Brian, you talked about kind of the growth rate of overall revenues and the growth rate of overall expenses. And if you look at your slide here, the compound annual growth rate for general operating expenses is, I don't know, 6.8 if I'm reading it correctly. And I think revenues aren't growing that fast. I mean, are we still in a situation where we're sort of running out of overhead, running out of room here in terms of levy limit and our ability to fund everything?
We certainly, the roadway or the runway certainly getting a little shorter as we go. And some of it right now really is just, there are some costs that we just are, I don't want to say out of our control, but are more difficult to control in terms of, originally, I'll give you an example. Last year, we were projected to have about over 20% increase in general in property insurance, and we were able to get it down. But those things are in retirement growing at 8.5%. The ones that are really not within our control are where we are running into the biggest problem, Joe, to be honest with you. So yes, we are in some ways running out of runway a little bit, but I still think with a mindful eye on it, we can certainly continue to manage it going forward. But at some point, it is going to become a little more difficult. And I think, which is a good opportunity now, one area that might make it a little bit more difficult potentially is solid waste. Because we don't have the retained earnings like we in that particular fund as we did even in our island home. And that certainly will, I think, is one area that may put the bigger squeeze on us moving forward.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Peter?
Yeah, Brian, the amount of money or amount of tax revenue that we get from new construction.
Mhm.
Do we have any sort of numbers on where we stand on new construction this year against 19, 20 or 20, 21 and 22 or 21, 22, 23?
I have all of the building permit application information from probably the last 3 or 4 years based on when we put it in the official statement. So I do have it. I don't have it right on my fingertips, Peter, but we do have it. And we do get it on a periodic updated basis from them. But the thing that we have to remember too is that when they apply for the building permit, it doesn't immediately become new growth. There's a process that it has to go through. So we could have the building permit, all of the money from the building permits today and look at it, but it could take 2 or 3 years before we realize in new growth, all of that building permit activity or longer, depending.
Thank you.
Other questions? Jill?
Hey, Brian. Question for you about the salaries for school and town, and I know that's separate, but with the growth in the salaries, is that related to hiring more people, or is it an increase in the salaries for each particular person?
So the school number is the rollover for every existing position that's filled right now. Okay, and any contractual agreements that may be in place, that's the number that will roll over for the school. The increase that we've budgeted is, as I mentioned, is just for known contractual agreements that are in place and known contractual changes for anyone in the organization at this point in time. There's still some potential contracts that haven't been maybe yet settled before we get into the budget, and we will calculate and add those in, but that's for everything known at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
So it doesn't include any new positions or anything like that because we haven't even started the process for that at this point.
Right.
Brian, when will you have the first quarter receipts? When do you typically get, or for each quarter, I guess, what's the timing of you getting that?
So the timing really is September 30th ends the first quarter, and conveniently enough on September 30th is when the Department of Revenue sends us the rooms and meals tax payment.
Okay.
So we get it right on the 30th.
Oh,
I haven't sat down with the town manager to formally lay out the process or the timeline, I think, for the first quarter presentation of the selectmen, but my expectation would be it would be sometime in October. And then once we get that, I will certainly be talking to the town manager about whether we can make any substantial changes to any of the local estimated receipts to see if we can increase them upward, or if we need to be mindful if they don't come in where we expected or close to what they came in on fiscal 21 on the year ago quarter. So we'll know on October 1st, I'll have a pretty good idea. It'll take us usually probably a couple days after that to finish posting everything that comes in, because there's always a rush of deposits that come in in the last week of the quarter. So it'll take us a couple days after the actual close of the quarter, but by the first week of October, I'll have a really good idea of what the first quarter looks like.
thank you. And on the salary number, does that include positions that are currently vacant but should be filled?
It includes it. So the rollover includes any contractual changes, but the total number includes any vacant positions that were approved that are currently in the budget. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Jill?
Sorry, one more question. I was thinking about the marijuana tax. Will that eventually kind of take over for the $650,000? Let's say you got $650,000 of revenue. I know we didn't get that this year, but going forward, will that take over for the money that the town is giving, or will that just always be an addition? I know we did it in addition last year, but going forward, if it's a significant amount.
Well, the marijuana tax money is specifically put into a special purpose stabilization fund, which is strictly and solely limited to use for substance abuse. So I don't believe it would eventually overtake the 650. I think it was envisioned to be its own separate pot of money that would be allocated under the same process that the contract review committee uses for the money that's allocated currently at the $650,000 level. So this money is, in my mind, does not take over the funding source for the 650.
But it
But I don't wanna
sounds like
speak
it
for-
could. I mean, legally, it
Pardon me?
sounds like it falls within the parameters of that particular stabilization fund, right?
Well, some of the things that are funded through the 650,000 most likely would not fit within the parameters of that stabilization fund. There's Cape Cod, there's legal services and a few other things that I don't think would fit the criteria and the definition of that special purpose stabilization fund.
Yeah, but legal services, that was included in, no, you're saying that we only used it for like fair winds and that we
Yeah.
didn't put it out for the legal. Yeah, that's right. We didn't. So, but it's definitely like 80% of the people that do apply.
Yeah, that's most likely true. I don't have the number right in front of me, but there is the substantial amount of that does go to support services that may be consistent with the substance abuse stabilization fund, but I have not been any part of conversations where that would eliminate the 650 from raise and appropriate. And I'm not sure that that's what we would do at this point.
Okay.
Other questions for Brian? No other questions. Okay. So, as always, Brian, we appreciate the heads up, the early on, take a look at this as we start the process for the coming season. And it's quite useful to get to see some of these things up front. And so thank you for that. I think the next agenda item would be committee reports. And then my husband talking to the dogs in the background in case anybody heard that. So at least they're not barking, at least he's not barking. So committee reports. Any people want to put their hand up and share? So Jill?
Well, I kind of want Brian or Rick to actually share the committee report, but I'm new on Capcom. Thanks everybody I didn't realize that was a weekly meeting that was year round, but so there you go. So it's been very informative and we've already reviewed some of the requests for the fire station and the police and the school. The school in particular is asking for over $16 million. I think it's up to 17 now, actually, that changed. And that's for like new fields and the tennis courts. They have some money for that, but they're not able to do the tennis courts, I don't think, unless they can move the baseball field at the same time. So that's a little bit complicated for them to work out. And anyway, it's been good. And, we're meeting weekly to review one or two of the budgets that you all will see later this fall.
Thank you, Jill. And any other committees active? Not really right now, right? CRC Contract Review Committee doesn't really start until February. So that's usually when that process kicks in, January, February. So, and then the others, and I don't see anybody raising their hand. Okay. In which case, I'm going to thank Rick. Nice to see you again. We thought you were going to get away from us, and here you are. And Libby, Brian, thank you as always. And may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And second,
Aye.
and by
Second.
roll call, Peter,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
George.
Aye.
Thank you. And Denise, I thank you, Terry, as always, for notes. And it was nice to see all of you. And we'll see you. Our next meeting is actually December 9th, the first public hearing of warrant articles.
I
So-
have an October meeting in my
Me
calendar.
too. Me too.
I have,
I think,
Rick, he sent it to
Denise
us.
is out of the country. She's like, don't worry about me.
yeah,
I
I'm
will
not here.
be
I'm
there
not
in
here.
October.
I
So,
have October 19th at 4.
I think we canceled a couple and we haven't updated the schedule yet because we just didn't have topics for those meetings. So, well,
Check with
I'll
Maria. when she's back.
check with Maria when she's back and then we'll
Yep.
send you out an update. But I have the next one is December 9th on mine. So,
You're also invited to a couple select board meetings.
oh,
I try to remind you about like next week.
thank you.
Yeah. And I will
Stephen-
not be able to make that meeting, so.
And neither will I. Stephen will be chairing the finance committee portion of that meeting next week. So,
Okay.
okay. Thank you, everybody. Nice to see you.
Take care, everybody. Good to see everybody.
Bye, everyone.